Hey guys, welcome to Mind Over Modo. This is the third part in the Crash Course Introduction to Scripting in Modo series. Possibly the longest title for a YouTube tutorial. I'm not sure, but anyway, last time we looked at how to get information out of the Modo app, and this time we're going to look at sending commands back into the app and controlling items that are there. But first of all, I want to show you guys where you can find references for these query commands and regular commands that we're going to be using. So if we go up to help here, we can find the SDK Developers Wiki. Now, there's a lot of information here, and I had to click around for a while to find what I'm going to show you, but I'm just going to show you exactly where I went to find this. If we go down here under Reference, and we click Script Query Overview, and then just ignore all this and go to the bottom of the page and click on Script Query Reference, we will find a listing of the different services that Modo has to query the scene. Command service, host service, layer service. This is where you can actually get inside a mesh item layer and start querying polygons, vertices, all that good stuff. But one thing that you'll notice, if you remember from the last tutorial, what we were using was the scene service. Now, I may just be missing something here. This may be at another place on the wiki site, but I do not see scene service here, and I haven't found it. If you or someone that you know knows where that is on the wiki site, please feel free to leave that in the comments. But there is another place that you can find that. Before I show you that, let's go back to the main page. I'll show you one more thing. If you just click on scripting and click on Python, you can see a more robust listing of the different ways to interface with Modo through the Python language. And we covered a few of these: LX out, LX eval. So now I'll show you another place that you can find a reference for this. And it's in an old PDF document that used to come with Modo. It's not completely supported in these current versions, but it still is in the Modo download. So if you're on the Mac and you go to the Modo app, right click and go Show Package Contents, you'll see this folder. You go inside there, you see the Help folder, go in there, and you'll see this PDF document called Scripting and Commands. I don't know exactly where to find this on Windows, but if you search for this, or if you search for where the help is located, you will probably find it. And if you open that up, I already have it open. I'm down ways. But if you go at the top, you'll see that right off the bat, this document is now obsolete. So just be forewarned. I don't know if everything in this document will work exactly as you want, but so far it has worked pretty good for me. And you'll see if we page down here, I'm trying to find exactly. First of all, here's Python scripts, and we can see some of those commands that were on the wiki. I think that's actually an exact replica from here. Also, there's a lot of good stuff in here, but if you keep paging down, there's layer service, and there is scene service. So it's in here. If you click on that, you can see the scene service query commands, and you scroll down a little bit and there's item, and that's what we've been using so far. So that's what I use. My background is a generalist. I'm not a programmer, and I don't have any direct connection to the Foundry, so there may be a more appropriate way that you're supposed to find this information. And if you know that, please feel free to leave that in the comments. That'd be a big help. But this is what I've been using so far, and I think that'll at least help you get started and get down the road for now. So having said that, let's go ahead and get started with the next part of our script. Okay, when we last left our script, it looked like this, and we had gotten all the items from the scene, and we had looped through and created our own list of those items. So now that we have that list, we can start to go through and do things to the items in the scene. So for this example, I'm going to show how to change the name of an item, and I'll show a couple of different ways to do this. I'm going to show how to change the name, I should say, of selected items. So, and there are a couple different ways to do that, and I'll show you those ways so you can have some options when you're scripting. So to do that, we need to start by making another loop. I'm just going to copy, paste that first line. And what we want to do is we want to check and see for each item in this list, we want to check and see if it is selected. So I'm going to create a variable, just call it item SEL, and we're going to do another query command. So let's go to that PDF and look at the item query commands over here. And if we scroll down, we'll see that there is a item is selected property that we can check. And we can see here that it returns a Boolean. So if you're new to scripting, that is a 0 or a 1, or true or false. So it returns 0, 1. 0 is false, 1 is true. You can see here the number 1 is the result. So if it's selected, it will return true, which would be a number 1. So that's what we want to check for over here. So our eval command is going to be query scene service item dot is selected, then that question mark and the percentage %s, so we can insert the variable and then percentage item again. So it's going to check each item in this list. It's going to check if it's selected, and then the true or false value will be assigned to this variable, 0 or 1. So that leads us right to the next thing we need to do. We need to check, we need to test what this variable, what value this variable gets. So we can do that in Python with a if statement, and we write that like this. We can type if item SEL equals 1. Now this is important. We put another colon. This is important in scripting if you're new to it. If you're not new to it, just sorry about that. But you use 2 equal signs if you're testing a value, and you use 1 equal sign if you're setting a value. So I'm testing item select or item SEL to see if it's 1. So I'm using 2 equal signs. If you don't do that, you'll get an error. So you go down here. We tab in again because we want this to be inside of this test. And if this tests true, then we're going to go ahead and change the name excuse me, of the item. Next, what I want to do is just test to make sure that this code is working. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to get the name of the item as it already exists and send that out through another lxout command. So I'm just going to create a variable item name equals lx.eval. Start to get used to that after a while. If we go back over here and we kind of scroll through this, I think it's up a little bit higher than where we were. We can see that there's item.name. So we're going to say query scene service item.name question mark %s %item. So the way this is going to work is we're only going to execute this line if the item select variable tests true. So if it tests false, we won't ever even execute this. So that's kind of how we're weeding out the items that we want. Even though we're still using this variable from the list that has all the items, it's only going to call this line if the item is selected. So now we'll go ahead, put in lx.out and item name. I'm going to save that. If we look back here in our scene, we have one item selected. So let's see what happens when we type in get items is the name of our script. All right, so we can see right here that we return one item. Here's our LX out for the list that we made, and then here's the LX out for the is selected test. So mesh is selected and it printed the name mesh. Let's just select another one just to make sure it's working. Click on that, double click in here to run the script again. And there we go. So directional light is selected. So now we know that's working. Now we can come in and add a command to change the name of that item. So I want to start by showing you a couple of references for these kind of commands that you can look for. And we can find that right in the Modo app. Now, one of the easiest things you can do is if you want to find the command for something, you can just do that action in the app and see what command shows up in the undo list. So if we want to change an item's name, we can just go over here to the name. Let's just call this my light. And then if we go over here, we can see that that used a command called item name. So that can be a really good way to give you a starting point for what you need to do. The other place you can look is under this commands tab up here. And you can see I already have done this, but if you want to search for something, you click this F button and you can type in a pattern string. I've already typed in item, and we get a list of things related to items. And if we scroll down, we can see there's a bunch of different item commands, and there's an item name command that we saw in the undo list. What this gives us in the command history is arguments that we can pass. It describes that in more detail. We see that there's a name, the name of the item, so that'll be the name that we're going to change it to, the type of item that it is, and an identifier for the item we want to rename. So I'm going to start writing this command with lx.eval as usual, quotes. I'm going to put in item.name, and I'm just going to put some placeholders for those arguments that we saw. So there was the name, there was the type, and there was the item. Now, this name is going to be a variable, so because we're going to create that in the script. So I'm going to replace that with %s, and this item is also going to be a variable because we're going to pull that from our list here. It's going to be this item. So I'm going to put another %s. So here's another trick. It's not really a trick. It's just a part of Python that we haven't gotten to yet. If you put a % and a parentheses, you can put in more than one variable, and it will insert it into these in the order that they come in the line that you are on. So if we have a variable for our name, we'll just call that name for now, and then we have item that we use over here. it'll go along, and the first %s sign it comes to, it'll grab the name variable and put it in, and the second %s sign, it'll grab item and put it in. So that's a really handy way to manage that with Python. The next thing we need to do is we need to put in a type. Now, for this specific script, we don't want to filter out any item types. We want this to apply to any type of item that is selected. So one thing to know in Modo is that items can belong to different type categories at the same time. And every item in Modo belongs to the locator type. So if we type in locator, we're going to make sure that anything that we've selected will be changed. Now, strictly speaking, you don't have to have locator in this command for it to work. If we go back to Modo, we go to the undo history, we can see here that it doesn't have, maybe this Xform core is another type. I'm not sure, but you don't have to do that. I could click in item name, and I could type in, see, this light, and it would change it. You can see it changes it over here. But the reason that will not work for us is that we need to have these other arguments in our command string. So if we left that out and put these two arguments, it would try to use the item as the type, and it would confuse the command and it would fail. So that's why we have to figure out how to include that in this command. So that should be ready to go. Now I want to go ahead and build this variable that we're going to use for name. I'm just going to call it new name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a combination of what the item is already named plus a little bit more. So I'm going to say new name equals the item name that we got up here already. And then I'm going to add to that underscore is selected. So now we've built a new string. It'll say the name of the item. In this case, if we look back here, this would be called this light. And then underscore is selected to anything that is selected. So let's go ahead and try this out and see if it works. Gonna go back to Modo. Gonna click on the last time we fired the script in the undo list. We can double click on that. All right, and we're getting this light is returning as being selected, but it didn't rename it. So we need to figure out why that is. And one test that I'm going to do to make sure that everything's working is I'm going to make another LX out, and I'm going to type in new name and see if this works. Double click here again. And new name is correct. This light is selected. All right, so now I'm going to test and see what item looks like, because that's the other thing that we're using. Let's go back, double click on this. Item is going to be the index 19. That's correct. So I'm not sure exactly why this isn't working. I'm going to go ahead and pause this for a minute and figure it out and come back. Okay, we are back, and it turns out the problem is that this argument here, this item argument, it doesn't want an index of the items in the scene. It actually wants the name of the item as it currently is before it gets changed. So the good news is that we already have that in a variable as part of our loop. It's right up here, item name. So now if we put item name here instead of item, hit save, let's go back to Modo, double click on our script, and we can see up here it has been renamed to is selected. So now let's undo that and select a couple of items and see if it works. Double click, and there we go. All those items now have is selected underscored. And this even works. We can go over to shading. We can select a material item. Hope it works anyway. Let's double click. Okay. Okay, that did not work, and I found out why. It's because materials are not included in the locator group. So I was wrong about that earlier. You can see here I've been working on this command here. I'm going to change the name to test and use that locator, and then the base material is the current name. If I hit return, nothing happens. But I know that this is called an advanced material. We can see if we click off and back onto it, this is an advanced material. So if we try that, if we try advanced material in the type instead, there, we can see it works. So, but now we have a little problem because in our command over here, we have hard-coded locator. So I think what we need to do is we're going to have to make this a third variable. Make a %S. Also, you'll notice that I put these curly brackets in here. Don't know if you need those, but this is one thing that Modo does when you have strings inside of strings. You can put it in curly brackets to let Modo know that. So each of these arguments is a word or a string. So these curly brackets are a way to show that since we're already inside quotes here. So I realized that had changed in one of those breaks, I think. So we'll go ahead and build a new variable called item type lx.eval. If we go back to our PDF over here, we scroll down and we see item type is one of the things we can get, and it'll return stuff like mesh and all of that. So let's go back over here and type in query scene service item dot type $?S $item. Oops, there we go. And then down here between new name and item name, we want to put item type. All right, now let's see if this works. Gonna go up here, double click our script. All right, it does. So since we have gotten the type for each item and fed that into the command, now it's renaming materials to, and we just had one mesh over here, and it was, I think, renamed from another time. Can undo a few things, get these back to some regular names. Okay, so now if we select this, let's even try this output mesh, that light. Let's double click. Those two are renamed, and those two are renamed. So it looks like that was the trick, is to just go ahead and get the item type and feed that through the command. I want to show you one other thing. Like I told you, there's a couple of ways to approach this, and this version is that we get a list of every item in the scene. We find out if those items are selected and then do our operation. But I found out there's another command that you can do where you can start out by getting all the items that are selected in the scene initially as a list. I started by saving this script under a different name just so we have the other one still available, because parts of this are going to still be important. But the difference is going to be the way that we build this item list that we loop through here. So if we look over in our reference document up here, and we scroll down a little bit, missed it, here it is, type is type and selection. So scene service actually has another query command we can send called selection, and we can query everything that is selected if we use all, or we can actually put in types based on this list of types that's up here. So if we want to go through everything that is selected and change its name, then we would use this command right here. And we can see in the description it says get a list. So this command will return a list already made. We don't have to build it. All right, let's go back here and we'll just start by wiping out some of this first part. And we're going to say this: selected items, SEL items equals lx.eval query scene service selection question mark all. Now instead of item num list, we'll just go over here and say SEL items. And the other thing that we don't have to do is we don't have to check if they're selected anymore. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to select all of these. There's a hotkey in Text Wrangler to changing indents, so that's really helpful in Text Wrangler. So I just move that indent over, and now we know that all these items will be selected. So then everything else is the same: the item name, item type, the new name, etc. So let's save this and see if this worked or if we just messed everything up. Okay. Gonna select a few things again like we did. All those are already selected. Now instead of get items, I'm gonna type in SEL items. Those commands aren't case sensitive, so if we hit return, all right, we can see that it worked. So that's another way to approach that specific example. There may be times where you need to do that type check for other types of scripts, but for this one, since we were working off selected items, we can make our script significantly more efficient and shorter by using that command. So that wraps it up for this lesson. I think I may do one more of these that looks at how to manipulate channels in Modo, change the position of an item, things like that. And I'll try to have that out next week. I want to say thanks to everybody who has subscribed and liked these videos. I hope these are helpful. Feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comments of these videos, and that'll help me make better tutorials in the future. So thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next lesson.